My dear brothers, respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the challenges that many people face from time to time is the fact that they pin their hopes on tangible results that are based on the effort they exert. In other words, to give you a basic example, if I study hard, I expect to pass my exams with flying colors. If I pass all my exams and progress through my secular education, I expect to receive a diploma or some kind of graduation certificate. And it's based on that I then expect to enter a university, get a degree, and as a result of that, I would then go on to apply for a job in my field, preferably a well-paying job that allows me to then go on to do all the things that I would like to do. But when it comes to religion, when it comes to spirituality, sometimes it's the effort that matters, not so much the end result. And this confuses many of us because the result is oftentimes either hidden from our sight, we don't see it, or it's delayed. It doesn't happen now. It's not meant to happen in this life, for example, or it's not meant to happen right now in the moment. Maybe some other time down the line, I will receive the reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His infinite generosity, chooses to give me. But because of this delayed gratification mechanism, and because of the expectation that we have, that whatever good originates and emanates from me has to reflect instantaneously in my life, this becomes a source of confusion. A simple example of that is how some of the companions of Imam Hussain chose to abandon the Imam at the last moment, perhaps not because they were afraid of the impending death and the cessation of their own lives. Maybe they were willing to pay the ultimate price for the sake of their Imam. Maybe. But at least as far as we know, based on their own words, the reason they abandoned the Imam was because they felt that their sacrifice would not yield the result that they expected it to. Al-Dhahhak al-Mashriqi said as much to the Imam himself. He said that the reason I'd like to leave you is because I don't think that my life or death is going to make any tangible difference. In other words, my death will not prevent your death. And so, in his mind, and according to his standard Euclidean mathematical equations, he was like, it won't make a difference. And if I die and you die, then what's the point? Obviously, we now look at that and think to ourselves, well, that's not the point. You don't get it. You've missed the whole plot. It's not about whether you could make a difference, because let's face it, the companions of Imam al-Hussain, none of them could make any meaningful difference to the outcome of the battle. Imagine you have 120, 130, there were 18 members of Bani Hashim. Let's say 100 companions from outside the family. That's 118 plus Imam Hussain, plus Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, that's 120. What's an army of 120 going to do in the face of an army that had at least, and when I say at least, it's because the estimates of the enemy combatants varies. At a minimum, the number that's been cited in the actual hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt is 30,000. Others have speculated and even provided evidence to suggest that the number was much higher than 30,000. 30,000 was the number of troops that had been sent from Sham. 30,000, Sham and Kufa. But these were conscripts. They were actual trained soldiers. Whereas there were many people who were sent when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, alayhi la'inullah, ibn Marjana, declared that every able-bodied adult man must depart for Karbala. The city of Kufa was devoid of men. And the city of Kufa was a massive city with a huge population. Some have said 300,000. So 300,000 in a city, if you subtract the women and the children, that still leaves you with a good 50, 60, 70,000 men. So 120 individuals, no matter how brave, no matter how courageous, no matter how devoted to their cause, all they can really do is maybe delay the inevitable outcome. So at this point, I want you to ask yourself this question. What would John the slave, what could he have done that would have reversed the trajectory of the events in Karbala? Not just John the slave, but Abis ibn Shabib. Abis, you might think to yourself, Abis was Abis. Abis was the man who single-handedly walked towards the enemy and they all ran away from him like sheep running away from a raging wolf. And in order to entice them to attack him rather than Imam Hussain, he had to take off his armor, he had to throw his helmet, he had to rip up his own shirt and say, look, I'm defenseless. Come get me. Leave Hussein. Leave his family. And it's only then that they began to attack him, not in the traditional way that Arabs and Arab warriors would fight battles back in the day, which was one-on-one. That's how every battle began. In order to show that you have men worthy of being called warriors, you had to go and face the enemy one-to-one. But they didn't do that. With literally every single member of the camp of Imam al-Hussain, they didn't do that. They could see the valor and the bravery and the heroism of these individuals. People who had sold themselves to death. They couldn't care less about what would happen to them. How could you not fear someone who doesn't fear anything? Especially death, no less. And so it was only then that they ambushed him. And I mentioned in one of the nights that when Abis was killed, multiple individuals and tribes came asking for the reward of killing Abis. And they had a fight amongst themselves such that Umar ibn Sa'ad la'natullah alayh told them, إِنَّهُ لَمْ يَكُنْ رَجُلٌ وَاحِدْ مَنْ قَتَلَ عَابِسًا. Don't act as if, you had it in you to go and kill Abis. It wasn't one man who did it. It was all of you collectively together. But even Abis, what difference could he have made to the battle's end result? Nothing. This is speaking on a strictly materialistic level, by the way. If you go higher into the spiritual realm, into the plane of the grandeur of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullahi alayh, once again, did Imam al-Hussein need any of these men? No, he didn't. Imam al-Hussein didn't even need Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He's the Imam. He's the Hujjah. And so the confusion that some of us experience is based on the fact that I want immediate results. If I don't get them, then it means either I'm flawed, my process is flawed, my actions are flawed, something's wrong. Or, worse than that, is when I am tempted to abandon service of the Imam of the time based on the fact that it doesn't produce any tangible results. Right? It's like, what's the point? Case in point, the Imam of our time has not yet arrived. The mentality that many of us suffer from, at least at a subconscious level in the very back of our minds, is I don't have to do much. I should become activated as a companion of the 12th Imam when he's here, when he launches his campaign of eradicating injustice from the face of the earth, when he announces his divine mandate. When the Imam makes the announcement, that's when the companions flock towards him. So, up until that point, there's not much for me to do. Now, keep this in your mind. We'll get back to it. When it comes to discussions revolving around the awaited Savior, the Imam of our time, there are lots of different disciplines, lots of different fields. I think in the mind of the average Shia, if you're a non-Shia, then the Imam occupies virtually no space in your head, even despite the fact that there is not a single other subject that has had more reports and traditions and hadiths attributed to the Holy Prophet to it than the awaited Savior, in the Sunni as well as the Shia corpus. But you have people whose interest lies in obscuring all of this, in obfuscating the name and remembrance of the Imam. You have the entire Muslim nation who couldn't care less, and so they sit down and they mock this idea. And even some of their notable speakers in the West, some of their leaders in the United States and elsewhere, they say, "No, I like the Shia. We don't believe in some Imam who will come at some point. And so we just have to wait it out until he returns. Instead, we believe in action." Yeah. We saw your actions. We saw, mashallah, how, devoted you are to the cause of the eradication of injustice. Thank you very much. All the slogans, all the empty rhetoric, all of that has now been laid bare for the entire world to see. Your own community sees it. How you ended up like the naked king, where you keep telling yourself, no, unlike the Shia, we're people of action. Which action? Exactly. Flocking to Hajj every year? Is that the action that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you? Anyway, my point is this, that this is one of those discussions that requires a lifelong commitment to learning. I'll repeat that again. To get to know the Imam of the time isn't a matter of a lecture or a series of lectures or perhaps a monthly session or something that we celebrate on the 15th of Sha'ban or an annual event. No, it's a lifelong commitment to learning about the Imam and all of the different dimensions that have to do with our connection to him. I'll give you a simple example. You might say, well, all of this just to get to know the Imam of my time? Yeah, absolutely. Number one, if tashayyu' had 4 pillars, we're not speaking about usul al-din, and we're not speaking about furu' al-din, but the 4 fundamental pillars of the spiritual nourishment and growth of the Shia psyche. We would say that the first one is tawalli, allegiance to the devoted servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to align and coordinate my faith, my beliefs, my actions, and even my emotions, meaning love and hatred, towards the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has selected to be His vicegerents, to be His representatives. This is what we refer to as tawalli. That's a whole discussion in itself. What is tawalli? What are the different dimensions of tawalli? How is it manifested in our faith and beliefs? How is it manifested in our actions and practices? Tawalli is one dimension. Tabarri is the next dimension. Again, an entire web of interconnected subjects. You could literally draw a mind map that goes on forever, speaking about tawalli and tabarri, about which I don't want to talk about tonight. Then you have taqiyya. Taqiyya, which is an extension of tawalli and tabarri, and regulates it and manages it in ways that it doesn't cause harm. In other words, it affects and influences our behavior vis-a-vis tawalli and tabarri. Another very lengthy discussion, and many disciplines and fields that branch out of this simple topic. The 4th pillar of tashayyu' is intizar. It is about awaiting the Imam of our time. Now, again, in simple terms, for people who don't have ma'rifah, for them intizar is, yes, let's wait for the Imam to come. But this concept of intizar requires years of study, years of hard work, years of reading and asking and inquiring and so on, to discover all of its different layers and dimensions and depths and so forth. It's very simple to just roll off the tongue and say intizar. But what are the intellectual dimensions of intizar? What are the practical dimensions of intizar? What are the psychological dimensions of intizar? Psychological benefits for intizar, and how to maximize our benefit from intizar such that we can have a healthy society that does not suffer from psychological and mental problems. I'm not speaking about the pathological types. I'm not speaking about clinical depression and anxiety and so forth, which can be a result of chemical imbalances and that require medical attention and medicines and so forth. I'm speaking about the general day-to-day problems that cause us to be stressed out, that cause us to be anxious, that cause us to be angry, greedy, jealous, and so on and so forth, right? Does intizar play a role in all of that? Absolutely, you betcha. So, all of these are incredibly important subjects that require a lifelong commitment to studying, learning, asking, inquiring, begging. I read somewhere that Sayyid al-Khoi, rahmatullah alayh, one of our great maraja, was at a point in his life where he was already an established scholar of jurisprudence and legal theory and, as we call, fiqh and usul. We're not speaking about Sayyid al-Khoi, the young man. No, someone who had already achieved more than the average scholar in the Hawza could achieve in a lifetime. There was a specific discipline, a very narrow field of knowledge that he was not an expert in. Obviously, there were many fields of knowledge that he was no expert in those fields. And he wanted to learn about that. Without getting into the details, he asks around, he finds out that there is a scholar who is an expert in this field, and so he goes to him. He says to him, could you maybe teach me, give me a course in this subject? He said, no, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. Imagine saying no to Sayyid al-Khoy. He said, I'm too busy. So the Sayyid insisted and persisted and kept asking him time and again. Eventually he said to him, listen, I have a class, the teacher. He said, I have a class at 6 a.m. at the shrine and mausoleum of Amir al-Mu'mineen. I leave the house at 5:20. It takes me about 20 minutes to get to the shrine. I will give you those 20 minutes to walk with me toward the shrine, and perhaps I can teach you a thing or two, or you can ask me your questions, and I'll be happy to help. By the way, there are times when you see me walking out and I'll be placing my cloak over my head as opposed to on my shoulders. If you see the cloak, the abaya, on my head, it means that I'm trying to focus, I'm trying to prepare my class in the shrine. Don't talk to me, don't approach me. But if you see the abaya on my shoulder, then you can come and ask me in those 20 minutes while you walk with me. And so the Sayyid says that, 2 times out of 6, right? 6 days in a work week in the Muslim world, at least back then. And he says 2 or 3 times out of 6, he had the cloak over his head, which means that I would go all the way to his house to walk him to the shrine, and I'd see him in this state, and I'd refrain from bothering him or interrupting his thought process. You have to beg. You have to plead. You have to find the right scholars and then somehow get them to give you a snippet of what they know so that you could continue to grow your connection and your ma'rifah and your gnosis to the Imam of the time. It doesn't come cheap. I mentioned the hadith al-Qudsi yesterday, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Prophet Dawood, he says to him, people expect to receive knowledge in comfort and in times of ease, and just to listen to a podcast and suddenly you're a scholar of religion. No, you're not. You haven't even begun to scratch the surface. People spend decades in the hawza, and then they issue a fatwa, and at the end of it they're like, Wallahu a'lam. Allah knows best. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. That level of certainty that a tiny little bit of knowledge gives some young people, may Allah bless them for trying, but they seem to develop a sense of arrogance. They call it certainty, I call it arrogance. Just by accumulating a tiny bit of knowledge, which is why they say that a little bit of knowledge is more dangerous than having no knowledge. I tend to disagree with that based on the definition of knowledge. But to a degree, you can sympathize and you can kind of understand why taking a few classes here and there, attending the gatherings of some scholars and whatnot, suddenly you think you're a know-it-all, idiot savant who's like a walking, talking encyclopedia. No, you're not. You have to beg and plead and try with every iota of your existence so that maybe at some point the Imam will open your heart and give you a little bit of knowledge about him. Now, this is the second introduction. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, sallu alayhi wa alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The Imam says in a hadith, remember the first introduction? Added to the second one, it starts to make sense. The Imam says, إِنَّهُ مَنْ مَاتَ وَيَنْتَظِرُ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ. The one who dies while awaiting this matter. Which matter? It's obvious. Awaiting the return of the Imam. Dies while waiting. Doesn't say the one who meets the Imam, the one who joins the Imam, because, and I said this the other day to the respected sisters, I said, statistically speaking, the chance of me actually seeing that day, right, are very slim. My chances are very slim. I hope it happens. I pray it happens. I beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I get to see it. But again, we're talking mathematics and statistics and probability theory. So the Imam gives glad tidings to the vast majority of people who believed in the Imam but never got to see him. So he says, "Man mata wa huwa yantadhiru hadha al-amr." Before I finish the rest of the hadith and what the Imam is trying to convey to us, let's talk a little bit about two concepts. One, intizar, and two, hadha al-amr. Intizar, you've heard a lot of discussions about this, I'm sure. You've listened to lectures, inshallah, about the concept of intizar. But I just want to illustrate what intizar means using a very basic example. In my family, and I am definitely not unique in this, almost every other Iraqi family you talk to, they're in the same position. They've been through the same suffering and same sort of trials and tribulations. In my family, 17 individuals were either executed, assassinated, or went to prison under the regime of Saddam and never came back. I'll mention just one case, and that's my great-grandfather, Sayed Muhammad Sadiq al-Qazwini, from my mother's side. Sayyid Muhammad Sadiq was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, about 80 years old when he was apprehended. When he was arrested, his house was stormed in the holy city of Karbala, and he was taken and never returned. My aunts, my mother's aunts, so his daughters, they always, many of them have passed away now, but they always lived in this uncertainty. They'd go to a Fatiha of someone who's died, and let's say somebody's father has died. So one of my aunts would go to the daughter of the deceased, and she'd say, "You know what, you're so lucky. At least you know your father is dead. You can mourn for him, you can find closure, you can cry, and the grief and the tears, they help. They help in sort of removing this asphyxiating feeling around the heart. But I don't even know whether my father is alive so that I'd be happy for him, or dead so that I could finally find some peace and cry for him." Again, many people are like this. Or mothers whose children were captured, either in war or by the Saddam regime, or now in many of these Gulf states where they were boasting for years about pluralism and about how we've built Hindu temples and we've built synagogues and we've built churches. But the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt have to suffer. Somebody gets arrested in the middle of the night for no justifiable reason, simply because he's Shia, simply because he says, "Ya Hussain, Ya Zahra, Ya Ali," right? Now imagine the mother of this child. She doesn't know what's happened to her son. If somebody gets released from prison, you bet this is what she does. And I've seen examples like this. She hears that someone's been released. She runs to that person's home. She says, "Have you seen my son?" And she shows him a picture. "Have you seen my boy? Was he in your cell? Was he in your block? Do you have any news about him?" Recently there was a case, one of our friends, he's from Afghanistan. His son gets deported to Afghanistan, doesn't come back. There's no news, no connection, nothing. They have no idea where he is. His mother died still believing that her son was going to come home one day, even though everybody told her, "Your son is gone. He's gone. He was captured by the Taliban. What do you think they're going to do to him?" A mere whisper that someone comes out and says, yes, maybe I've seen someone who resembles the picture that you've showed me in some prison somewhere in this vast country. And the mother would just fly off from the delight and happiness that my son is still alive. If you go and visit her at home and say you take some sweets or confectionery or whatever, she'd say, you know, my son loved this. He really enjoyed this. She's always looking for an excuse to talk about her son. If she cooks a meal, she's like, my son used to love this. I wish he'd come back today so he could share this meal with us. اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب من شيعة أمير المؤمنين بحق مولانا الحجة. It's hard, it's painful. My point is this. This mother is in the state of what? Intizar. She's waiting. Every time she wakes up, she's thinking of her son. Every time she goes to bed, she stays up late thinking of her son. Every time she cooks a meal, every time she's invited somewhere, every time she goes to the shrine, every time she visits somebody, she's always thinking of her son. As-Sayyid ibn Tawus Ridwanullah ta'ala alayh says in his will, it's a will that should be read. I don't know if it's been translated into English. Now it's really easy to do so, right? It's called Kashful Mahajjati Lathamaratil Muhjah. Remember this title, look it up, by Sayyid ibn Tawus. It's a book, but it's actually his will to his two children, his son and his daughter. In it he says to his son, for those of you who are trying to take notes, Kashful Mahajjah Sayyid ibn Tawus. He says to his son, he says, if you had a chicken, again, this is a very, very basic example. If you had some roosters and chickens in your backyard, and one day you woke up and the chicken was missing, what do? You run outside. You start looking around. You knock on your neighbor's doors. You ask everyone you see. If you suspect that the chicken just came out, you see somebody walking by, someone jogging, someone exercising, you're like, did you see a chicken? Did you see a chicken? It looks like this, it looks like that. People who lose pets now, they put posters everywhere. Then Sayyid ibn Tawus says that we are missing the Imam of our time. We're like a child who just doesn't get it. A child who's too busy playing in the park, even though he's lost his mother. The child might not get it. The child is still happy, jovial, excited, running around, not a care in the world. But guess who's worried about him? His father is worried about him. His mother is worried about him. Our Imam is worried about us. We don't think about him as often as we should. To us, the Imam is an abstract notion. To us, the Imam is just a box that we tick. As a Shia, I also believe in some Imam who will one day, maybe I'll get to see him. But is that really someone who is in the state of intizar? Another example that a lot of our ulama mention, they say that if, let's say I invited you to my house, right? And I said you can come at 9 o'clock, for instance. You show up at 9 o'clock. And then you look around, there's no smell that suggests that I've got food that I'm preparing in the kitchen. So at some point you go into the kitchen, you're trying to wash your hand, and there's like nothing on the stove, nothing in the oven. There's no food at all. And so you go back, and obviously because I'm your friend or your relative, and we sit and we have a nice chat and all that. And then like at 11 o'clock, I say, oh, the food. Okay, what would you like to eat? Maybe I can Uber something. I can order something online. And you're like, what kind of an invitation was this? Someone who's invited somebody and is waiting for them. They're ready to go at a moment's notice. I'll give you another simple example. You know how every once in a while, especially in the last couple of months or so, there were, because of the war and the conflict, the airspace would be closed in some countries, right? Not here, but in the Middle East, a lot of the airspace would be closed. Now, if you had to travel, think about this. You really had to travel, either because you wanted to go to ziyarah or because you wanted to go on some business or whatever. You wanted to come back home. Now, if they tell me that the airspace is closed, there are no flights available, right? What would happen? Because I need to travel, I'm ready, packed up, everything's set. I'm just waiting for the airspace to open. And as soon as the airspace opens, I'm the first to book my flight out, right? That means I'm waiting. I'm waiting. But if they tell me that, you know, the airspace opened, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, good news. Then I'd be goofing off a little bit, waiting for a couple of days. Let's see what happens. Which flights are available, did you say? How much is the ticket again? Within 2 days, I try to book the ticket, and it's gone. Because there's a rush. Everybody wants to leave. Because they're afraid that the airspace might be closed again. What's the difference between these two? The difference is one is in the state of intizar, packed up, ready to go, while the other one is just not that excited or not that committed to traveling. Which one of these two am I when it comes to the Imam of my time? Am I packed up and ready to go? Or am I one of those people who says, you know what, when the Imam comes, we'll see. You know, I'm sure we'll find a way. The Imam wants us to be in Mecca as soon as he announces his mandate, pronto. There's no delay, there's no let me think about it, there's no let me see. Everything has to be packed up. Everything has to be ready. I'm waiting. Otherwise, I'm not waiting. If I delay even by a half an hour, it means I'm not waiting. It means I start my waiting process after the fact, after the event transpires. Does that make sense? So, we then have to ask ourselves, are we truly waiting or not? The Imam says in the hadith, Man mata wa huwa yantadhir, the one who dies while waiting is exactly at the same level and rank as the one who is in the tent of the Imam. Meaning right next to him, in the command center of the Hujjah ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah. But I'd have to be waiting. Now, how is that reflected in everyday life, in practical sense? If I say, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum, as we are instructed to do so with regards to Imam al-Zaman, Imam al-Rida says to Ar-Rayyan ibn Shabib, he says that if you wish to receive the reward of the companions of Imam al-Hussain, you must constantly say, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum, فَنَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. Obviously, these are words that I utter using my tongue, right? But the tongue should be a window into the heart, which means that I have to truly intend to and believe and want to be with Imam al-Hussain and wish for being with Imam al-Hussain. And had I been there, I would defend the Imam with my own blood and soul. That's what it means. Is this the case? You might say, well, how do I measure that? What's the metric? How do I know if I'm truly capable of something like this? Had the opportunity been given to me? The answer is this. Right now, we have majalis of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. Do I really care enough to attend these majalis? The Holy Prophet says, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ رَوْضَةً مِنْ رِيَاضِ الْجَنَّةِ فَارْتَعُوا فِيهَا. If you see a garden of paradise, then go and take from it. Take the fruits from those trees, pick them, eat them, enjoy and benefit from these gardens of paradise. They say to him, Ya Rasulullah, which garden of paradise? We're still in this world. The Prophet said, yes, majalisu dhikrillah. The gatherings where God is remembered, where Imam al-Hussain is mentioned and eulogized, where Imam al-Zaman is spoken of, Are these majalis something that I truly care about, that I go out of my way, maybe cancel a couple of things here and there just to attend these majalis? Do I care enough to uphold these majalis, to serve in these majalis, to play a part in these majalis, physically, financially, or in any other way possible? Is this something that I care enough about? Because if it's not, then it'd be difficult to make the case that had the Imam been here, I would have defended him. This doesn't require any human sacrifice. I don't need to shed blood in order to uphold the memory of Imam Hussain. So if I'm not willing to do this, surely when it comes to a much, much bigger level of sacrifice, I'm not going to be able to do that either, right? So that's a good metric that you can think of. And you can test yourself and your own will using this metric. So, the Imam says that whoever dies in the state of intizar, where when I eat food, again, remember that mother. Remember the one who's desperate to book his tickets out of the country with a closed airspace. Remember all the examples that have to do with being in a state of constant remembrance, intizar, and anticipation. If I'm like that, suddenly the Majlis of Imam al-Hussain to me becomes a matter of critical importance. I have seen people, my brothers and sisters, who would say, just recently there was a case where a man and his wife said, you know what, Muharram is coming. Right here we have it easy. Alhamdulillah, we have so many institutions and we have buildings that we can utilize and we have mu'mineen who have made all of this available to us. But there are parts of the world, in Africa, in South America, in parts of the Middle East where the Shia are not a majority, and even everywhere else, where what happens is this: you want to hold a majlis, you have to set up a tent, right? This idea of holding majalis under a marquee, under a tent, comes from the fact and stems from the fact that they don't have buildings to do this in. So in this case, this husband and wife duo, may Allah bless them, each one supporting and inspiring the other. They say, you know what, Muharram is coming. What do? Let's hold a majlis. Where? There's this plot of land, maybe we could take it. Well, let's find out who owns it. They ask around, they find out that there's a guy who owns it who lives overseas in the United States. So they track him down and eventually they get a hold of him like, brother, there's this land, you're not using it. Maybe we could use it to hold a majlis for Abu Abdullah al-Hussain. He's like, okay, how many nights do you want it for? They said 10 nights. He said 10 nights, $1,000 a night. SubhanAllah, you have a window. Imam al-Hussain is saying, come, I want you to join my camp as well. No, I want to profit from it. I want to make money off of it. And so the husband goes back to his wife. He says he wants $10,000. Where are we going to come up with $10,000 from? She said to him, how about your car? This is a real life story from just a few days ago. My car? But I need it. She's like, if we don't have a car, we can get a taxi. We could walk. We could take the bus. We'll take public transport. Imam al-Hussain has already rewarded us and paid us for the car and then some. To hell with the car. Let's just sell it. He sells his car so that he could hold a majlis for Imam al-Hussain. I know people who have sold their homes. My point is, I'm not saying take drastic measures. I'm saying we need, you, mashallah, your sincerity is well established. I need to figure out for myself whether I'm willing to make a sacrifice. If it's a financial sacrifice, if it's a matter of time or whatever, if I'm willing to do that, then maybe I'm ready for the next step. Otherwise, I've got a problem. Otherwise, my intizar is questionable at best. Anyway, the Imam then says, and we've run out of time, the Imam says that من مات وهو ينتظر هذا الأمر كان كمن كان معه في فسطاطه. What is هذا الأمر? To establish a connection to the Imam of the time, you need to get to know the Imam. Who is Al-Hujjah ibn al-Hasan. Who is Imam al-Mahdi really? We honestly don't get it. We don't get it because we lack ma'rifah, we lack gnosis. I'll just share a couple of snippets with you. You know how we have many ahadith in both Sunni as well as Shia collections in which Rasulullah describes Amir al-Mu'mineen as the epitome and embodiment and point of concentration of all of the great prophets of God in their most sublime attributes. من أراد أن ينظر إلى آدم في علمه فلينظر إلى علي بن أبي طالب صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. Adam's greatest attribute was his knowledge. علم آدم الأسماء كلها. The Quran speaks about it. من أراد أن ينظر إلى نوح في حلمه. من أراد أن ينظر إلى موسى في بطشه. من أراد أن ينظر إلى عيسى إلى إبراهيم. All of these prophets, their number one unique attribute, you want to see that? Look at Ali ibn Abi Talib. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. This is well established. We have plenty of ahadith in the Sunni hadith as well as the Shia. Now, we also have a hadith where the Prophet and the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt speak about the Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah as the epitome not of the previous prophets alone, but also as the epitome and distillation and concentration of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt. من أراد أن ينظر إلى علي بن أبي طالب في تمامه وكماله فلينظر إلى المهدي. من أراد أن ينظر إلى الحسن في جوده وكرمه وسؤدده فلينظر إلى المهدي. من أراد أن ينظر إلى الحسين. We speak about Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Imam Hussain, to us, we've discovered a tiny little bit about his grandeur, right? Rasulullah says, you want to see the Mahdi? You want to see Imam Hussain? Look at the Mahdi. And the Prophet lists the attributes of each Imam, the most visible, the most obvious of those attributes. من أراد أن ينظر إلى زين العابدين في عبادته وسجوده فلينظر إلى المهدي. Allahu Akbar. Who is this Mahdi? It's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has picked the best for last. All of the Imams are one essence. All of the Ahlul Bayt are one entity. Right? Rasulullah is obviously the best. Amirul Mu'mineen, Fatimatu Zahra, Al-Hasan wal-Hussein. But after that, it gets really confusing. Which is why the narrator says, I walked in as Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was in the state of sujood. And he was saying the following, Sayyidi, غيبتك نفت رقادي. Sayyidi, my master. If Imam al-Sadiq addresses Imam al-Mahdi as Sayyidi, then what am I and people like me going to say? How do we address him? They said to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, who are you talking about? He said, the Mahdi. Even Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Rasulullah before Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Rasulullah in his Ghadiriyya sermon, he says, أيها الناس أنا النبي وعلي وصي ووارثي ومنا مهدي هذه الأمة. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rasulullah boasts about the Mahdi. That's why he's referred to, and you've heard me at the beginning of every majlis, refer to Imam al-Zaman as what? طاووس أهل الجنة. Why? A peacock is the most beautiful bird. And it's a bird that shines among all the other birds. There are lots of beautiful birds, but the peacock is something else. When the I don't know if you've seen a peacock in real life. I have. It's majestic. It is mesmerizing. When the peacock begins to open its wings and flaps the feathers, and you see the colors shimmering and shining and gleaming. Imam al-Zaman is the epitome of all of the prophets, messengers. Again, we're not speaking about superiority versus inferiority, who's more important. No, no, no. We're just saying that the Imam reflects all of them. Sayyidi ghaybatuk nafat ruqadi ya Hujjah ibn al-Hasan ya Mahdi al-Umam. Imam Zayn al-Abidin in his sermon in Sham mentions that we have been uniquely selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because we have Rasulullah from this household. وَمِنَّا الْفَاروق وَمِنَّا Asadullah wa Asadu Rasulih. All of these individuals, they're from this household, from this family. Then at the end the Imam says, وَمِنَّا مَهْدِيُّ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ. The Mahdi is from us. He's from this family. Imam Sajjad boasts about Al-Hujjah ibn al-Hasan. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء. So let us call out to our Imam. Let us ask Allah to hasten his reappearance. As I said, the Imam thinks about us. The Imam is worried about me and you. Imam al-Jawad writes to one of his companions by the name of Ali ibn Mahziyah. His father was a Christian, but he became such that Imam al-Jawad says to him, Ya Ali ibn Mahziyah, I pray for you day and night. وَلَوْ قُلْتُ أَنِّي لم أرى خيرا منك لرجوت أني كنت صادقا. I pray for you the whole time, and if I said that I've never seen anyone like you, then I'd be telling the truth. Ya Hujjah ibn al-Hasan, Ya Mahdi al-Umam, يا صاحب الزمان عجل على ظهورك. Not just because we would love to see the one that reflects and represents every prophet of God and every messenger, although that would be the ultimate honor. But there is another reason we call out for you. أين الطالب بذحول الأنبياء؟ أين الطالب بدم المقتول بكربلاء؟ أين الطالب بدم المقتول بكربلاء. Tonight I will take you to Karbala just before Imam Hussein's departure. أجرك الله بقية الله. When Imam Hussain came back one last time to bid his family farewell, the women, the children, everyone gathered around him. Imam al-Hussein suddenly noticed that his daughter Sakina was nowhere to be seen. You know how when a daughters are really sweet, aren't they? They love their father. And in this case, maybe she was trying to show her father that she's really upset. She's trying to get his attention, or maybe because she couldn't bear to see him depart. Imam Hussain looked around, Sakina wasn't there. He knew where to look for her. فَذَهَبَ إِلَى الْخَيْمَةِ. This is all while Imam Hussain was gushing blood from his wounds. وَالدِّمَاءُ تَفُورُ مِنْ صَدْرِهِ بِأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي يَا أَبَا عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. Yet the Imam went looking for his sweetheart, for his daughter. فَرَآهَا جَالِسَةً. He saw her sitting in a corner of the tent, her head lowered between her two knees and crying. Imam Hussain went to her, فَاعْتَنَقَهَا عَلَى صَدْرِهِ. The Imam hugged her, he embraced her, even while the blood was gushing out and streaming down his chest. فقالت له أبتاه أعدنا إلى حرم جدنا رسول الله. Take us back to our grandfather's shrine, Rasulullah. The Imam replied, هيهات لو ترك القطا لغفى ونام. I can't do that, my sweetheart, my daughter, it's too late. They won't let me take you back. فصاحت سكينة. They say that for the first time she began weeping out loud. فصاحت بكاء عند أبيها الحسين. Imam Hussain said something. He recited a verse of poetry. He says, لا تحرقي قلبي بدمعك حسرة. لا تحرقي قلبي بدمعك حسرة ما دامت الروح في جثماني. As long as I have my soul in my body, don't burn my heart with your tears. I can't bear this. In other words, Imam Hussain is saying, don't make this harder than it has to be. As long as I'm alive, don't break my heart. They hugged, they embraced, they then left. Imam Hussain headed towards the battlefield when he suddenly heard a faint voice behind him. مهلا مهلا يا ابن الزهر. Lady Zainab knows that the only way she can force her brother to return, he had to go, there was no other way, but she could get his attention and make sure he comes back by mentioning the name that was most beloved to him, the name of their mother Fatima. مهلا مهلا يا ابن الزهراء. Imam Hussain rushed back to her. You mentioned our mother's name, my sister. What do you want? She said, I have one last thing I wish to do. My mother instructed me to do that. Get off your horse. He dismounted it. Ajarak Allah, baqiyat Allah. She then kissed Aba Abdullah on the throat. Then she kissed him on the chest. Ya Fatima al-Zahra, why tell your daughter on your deathbed to kiss your son on the throat and the chest and the forehead? The forehead is the one I'll talk about, because a few moments later, وَإِذَا بِأَبِي الْحُتُوفِ لَعَنَهُ اللَّهُ رَمَى الْحُسَيْنَ بِالْحِجَارَةِ. ما مثل يومك يا ابو اليمة قضى راسك عالرمح وجسمك عالثرى. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم.